Jonathan Pye, or his actual name, Tom Walker, is a cult phenomenon, which I know because so many of you have basically begged me to go and interview him.
Here we go again, it's fucking Groundhog Day, isn't it? Jeremy Corbyn is elected Labour leader and I'm stood here saying, oh, it won't last long.
For the uninitiated, Jonathan Pye is this fictional news presenter who speaks his mind, goes on these big rants.
It's not, let them just get on with their job, you know, being in opposition.
But he takes on the left in a way that makes a lot of people on the left feel uncomfortable, particularly about things like identity politics. I want to get to know him and what makes him tick, and basically, is there a political project behind it? And what's his real beef with the left? What was Jonathan Pye all about? When it was created, what was that character trying to do?
For a start, everyone sort of thinks that I'm trying to push some sort of political agenda. It wasn't that at all. I was an out-of-work actor. I was desperate for work, so I created my own work and started writing my own thing. The point of the character, I suppose, was this idea that newsreaders have a very prescribed way of doing things. They must get pissed off at the agenda and the stories that they have to tell it and the way they have to tell it. So what do they think when the producer says cut? The first one I did was a response to Jeremy Corbyn being elected, and I was following Jeremy Corbyn's sort of leadership. And I thought, do you know what, I'd quite like him to get there, because imagine a socialist in charge of a left-wing party. What an extraordinary thing that would be. That would be interesting. And I watched him win, and they cut to outside. About 30 seconds after he'd won it, the presenter went, how long do you think he's got? And I thought, there you go. You've signed, sealed, delivered his fate. The mainstream media, will not accept him. And it took them until the last election for him to be accepted. And it really annoyed me, really angered me, that reaction.
Why do you think Jonathan Pye became such a massive success?
One, I can swear a lot. I mean, it sounds like he's making it up on the hoof. Believe it or not, Pye's really quite tightly written. You know, I actually have to write it and hone those scripts.
You exploded the charade.
I know. The young generation think what I'm doing is new. Shouting at the Tories. Wow, we've never seen that before. The older generation go, I remember that. I mean, it used to be mainstream. Ben Elton, Alexis Sale, they were all over the BBC. I think the art of satire was lost a bit in the Blair years, in the New Labour years, because they were our team. Now we've seemed to, it's much more healthier politically, but it's much more healthier satirically. You've got a right wing and a left wing. Clashing in the middle.
You know where you are.
You know where you stand. I mean, that last election was fascinating. You had two manifestos that were demonstrably different.
Yeah.
You go,
no
now
one can really say they're all the same. They still do, like knocking doors.
Yeah.
People still say it, but
they're all the bloody same.
Objectively, they're not.
No.
And that's the biggest gap in our lifetime.
And that's what's fascinating. And whether you like Corbyn or not, you've got a left and a right. And I think that's surely where politics kind of should be.
Free speech, define it. What is free speech?
Well, the freedom to articulate your opinion. If that opinion offends, who gives a shit? I'm sorry. If you were a racist and you genuinely felt that your skin colour made you better than that guy over there with brown skin, you should have the right to articulate it, because then I can tell you where it's going wrong. You put it underground and it becomes dangerous.
Historically, there have been these great struggles against racism. There have been great victories in terms of attitudes. In the 1950s, most people thought interracial relationships were wrong.
Yes.
The way that changed wasn't by simply people sitting around having polite discussions.
Yes.
It was by people organising on the street and making it clear that it was absolutely unacceptable.
Yes.
Do you genuinely think that racism is something which is a legitimate perspective which can just be debated? For example, I believe in renationalisation of the railway. Somebody else might not agree with renationalisation of the railway. That's a debate to be had as a legitimate debate. Debating whether or not somebody is inferior because of the colour of their skin is simply an unacceptable perspective, isn't it?
It is unacceptable. But to shut someone down because of... this
what
is
do you
the
mean
real
shut
problem.
them down? That's what I don't understand.
Well,
What do you mean
all
shut
right.
them down?
But probably a bad example that I gave you. My point is that a lot of debate is shut down these days, especially from the left, and I get it quite a lot. If people disagree with me, they imply bigotry, they imply racism. Because, in theory, if I'm a Nazi, I shouldn't be allowed to speak. So they shut me down because I say something that they disagree with, and they do it by inferring that I'm a Nazi or a sexist
So
or a
this
racist.
is why I think there's often a misunderstanding about free speech. This is
Yes.
where we'll disagree, which is using
absolutely,
our free speech as
absolutely,
it.
yeah.
There are some people on the right who think that free speech means the right to say what you want without being challenged. If people regard something as racist, they have the right to call that out.
Absolutely, but as long as you concede that they do have the right right to express it.
If somebody says, let's meet up in Soho tomorrow at 5 o'clock and kill as many gay people as we can, you would obviously support their arrest, surely.
I would,
But
as long as...
We agree there are some limits on freedom of speech.
There are, but that's already dealt with in the law, because you're inciting hatred, you're inciting violence. What about if that person was using irony, hyperbole to make a different point?
No one calls for their arrest.
Well, someone was recently convicted in Scotland for teaching his dog to do that, to do a Nazi salute. The judge said context and intent weren't important, just the idea that this potentially could cause offence.
I mean, again, it's just that the left often will just call stuff out as racist and homophobic, and there are some who go, well, you're being too trigger happy with that, you're being too...
I think so.
But that is still constantly construed as an attack on freedom of speech.
I do think it's a problem, you know.
In what way, though?
Give
me a...
Okay, for example, of late, there are a lot of people that have called me a Nazi apologist, directly a Nazi, rape apologist, misogynist. To call me a Nazi apologist, one suggests you don't know really what the horror of that of what real Nazism is, and that's dangerous, because you water down, you dilute the meaning of you're a misogynist, hatred of women. We ban that word about all the time these days, the left.
Is it bandied around? I mean,
I think so.
Because we live in a society, 1.4 million women a year face domestic violence.
Yes.
There are 400,000 sexual assaults, there are 95,000 rapes. The vast majority of those cases, there is no justice. Women are objectified routinely, women are in the lowest paid, most good jobs. This is a very sexist, misogynistic society.
It's very difficult for me to accept that we live in a inherently misogynistic or an inherently racist or an inherently homophobic society. Now, you might say that that's my straight white male privilege, but also what it is that I've never, I don't think, judged anyone by their gender, their sexuality, or the colour of their skin.
If I was holding hands with another man walking down the street,
yeah,
and someone said, "You fucking puffs,"
yeah,
is that free speech?
No, it's.
But why not? Why isn't that free speech? It seems like you're saying that these are just words and freedom of speech is sacred and you're an absolutist, but then you have accepted there are very clear limits to freedom of speech, that somebody doesn't have the right to say about two gay men that they're, fucking queers or puffs or...
They don't, but they do have the right to, like, for example, the Australian referendum over same-sex marriage. I heard a lot of people say that we shouldn't have had this referendum, that it should just happen, and of course gay people should have equal rights to straight people. Now, to me, that is an absolute given. They said, it exposed bigotry. Again, I think I want my bigotry at the top. I want it where I can see it.
Would you have supported that over interracial marriage? If it was...
Jesus, that's a really good question, isn't it? What, a referendum on?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an awful situation you're putting me in. When we introduced same-sex marriage, there was clearly a taste for it in the country, where rightly or wrongly, 15, 20 years ago, there wouldn't have been. Mm-hmm. I don't think, right? Would you concede that?
That's because people struggle to make LGBT rights possible.
Absolutely. But in the end, David Cameron realised through amazing work the public was swayed to this point. I believe in Australia the public opinion wasn't as swayed as it was here, and therefore you had to have a debate about it.
But you wouldn't have done that with interracial marriage.
You've stumped me on that, because I just can't. Again, maybe I'm just too naive. I can't imagine not allowing that. Do you know what I mean? To me, it's a fait accompli, as it was with same-sex marriage. Please don't get me wrong, but all I'm saying is I don't think having a robust debate about something is a bad thing.
One of the things we talk about is identity politics. You talk about that a lot. What do you mean by identity politics?
For me, what identity politics means is this idea that most things or many things are framed with regards to your individual identity. Things like gender, sexuality, colour of your skin, right? Whenever I say something that people disagree with, mm-hmm. It is rare for someone to argue against my argument. What usually happens when someone disagrees with me, they say, you're using your straight white male privilege. That's it. End of debate. The implication of that is that I'm a bigot. Even if I'm wrong, because of my gender, sexuality, colour of my skin, you still haven't told me what I've got wrong. You're just telling me why I've got it wrong. It's literally straight white male privilege, la 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 la, and you go...
So would you understand that? I'm a white man. I've never been stopped and searched randomly by the police. Uh-huh. I've never had racist abuse yelled at me in the street. It is difficult for me, isn't it, to understand that experience properly, and it is therefore possible, isn't it,
yeah.
that I might say things
yes.
sometimes
yes.
which a lot of people who've had those lived experiences might go, mate, like, what the fuck do you know about this?
You're absolutely right, and I'm not suggesting that it doesn't exist, that straight white male privilege doesn't exist. What I am suggesting is it seems to be the go-to if someone says something you disagree with. What I don't have with you as a gay man is a shared experience of that. But I can empathise, I can imagine, and my experience of the world is as unique as anyone else's on this planet. And I am a liberal, and I think I'm a good person, and I'm willing to listen to other people's points of view. I'm not suggesting that these inherent privileges don't exist. What I'm questioning is their usefulness in political discourse, in debate. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but I mean, there's a huge body of work out there, if you read, by anti-racism activists, women's rights activists, trans rights activists, people who are either fighting for women or for various minorities who do genuinely, just factually encounter huge amounts of oppression and so on.
Of course. And the implication when one suggests that I'm wrong because of my sexuality, for example, in those instances, the implication is that I haven't bothered to read up on it and I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, maybe I've read everything in the world about it and I've come to this conclusion that you disagree with. So I just wonder its identity politics' usefulness.
So we're just over there from Parliament.
Yeah.
Women are still a minority in Parliament. Women are a minority in every sphere of public life. Women in society are concentrated in the lowest paid, most insecure work. That is something, isn't it, which is an injustice that has to be overcome. And
okay, well, let me pick you up on that point. Let's talk about the gender pay gap, right? So I just did a piece about that recently. A media that works with identity politics, they don't express it in the terms you just expressed it. Those headlines are, women get paid 87% less than men. You go, no, that's disingenuous. That's not the debate. The debate is why. Let's talk about why those things. You know, there was one it was Ryanair pay women 67% less than men. Now the implication there is that women get paid less for the same work. That's the implication with those headlines. So I just wrote a piece about it with Andrew about going, no, those headlines are disingenuous. Let's have a real discussion about you know, what societally, historically, why this has happened. I mean, I got absolutely slaughtered for it as a misogynist, as anti-feminist. Surely it's more adult and more feminist to be adult about it. I do find that often women are treated and very much as sort of victims, and a lot of women that I talk to really don't like being spoken to in those terms.
Isn't it just a bit political correctness gone mad? Isn't it just that cliche?
What I'm saying?
Yeah, when you can't say anything these days without being called a racist or I mean, this is an age-old argument.
There's a danger of oversensitivity, not with regards to these issues. Please don't get me wrong in that. There is, I believe, a culture of offence that has always been around, and it manifests itself in different ways. You know, I find it interesting being suddenly thrust into the comedy world, how censorious it is, how sensitive it is not to offend.
Do you think sometimes there can be a lot of punching down rather than punching up?
But again, that's from perspective. I like this thing that I did on the gender pay gap. I was accused of punching down. You go, no, I'm punching across through the crap, disingenuous headlines because I want to have a proper debate about it. That to me is not punching down at women, whereas I was accused of that. But I'm not convinced by this argument that humour has to punch up, down, or to the side. I think it has to attempt to be funny, which again, I fall down there quite a lot as well.
You're not alt-right or anything like that. A lot of your so you do get though, when you get all these people retweeting you who are alt-right, and
I don't get many.
What does that make you think though? Sometimes are you a bit like, why are they liking this? This is a bit odd.
Maybe it should concern me. It certainly concerns some members of the comedy world when some shit poster, as they call it, on the right goes, oh look, Jonathan Pye has said one thing I agree with. A lot of people ask me, don't you think you have a responsibility to blah blah blah, and that usually comes after I've said something they disagree with. What they mean is, don't you think you have a responsibility to say the world exactly as I think it? A lot of other people kind of often say, you know, it's not quite clear that what you're doing is satire. Well, I'm not going to write it for stupid people. If you can't see that it's a character.
I think it was a really interesting chat. I know that many of you like me to talk to people that I'm not on the same page with and have a healthy chat, as he himself said. So that's what we did. So I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Do leave your comments. Come up with other suggestions for people you'd like me to interview, including those I definitely don't agree with, within reason. We've got loads of videos, so just click on the ones we've done. and we'll do loads more interviews and other videos, hopefully. So tune in for that. As ever, subscribe, and I will see you next time.